Now, I wanted to briefly cover some of the limitations with this architecture, because even though I think this is a pretty powerful architecture, most of the components we're using are scalable. They'll auto scale, they're auto managed by Google Cloud and Firebase. But I tried to keep this as simple as possible, and in doing that, we do have some significant limitations that you might have already recognized or you might not have. One is when it comes to PubSub making a push to our Cloud Run service, it's specifically making a post request, an HTTP request, and we know that it needs to receive an acknowledgement within 600 seconds. And if it doesn't, PubSub is going to retry that. Now, that also means that it's going to close the first HTTP connection. So what's going to happen to our Cloud Run service? Well, it's still going to process the video, thankfully. It's not going to stop. And once it's done, it's going to write that to cloud storage and update the metadata, but it won't be able to respond to PubSub. And that's a problem because we already updated the status in Firestore. The video is already processed, but PubSub is just going to keep trying to redeliver the message and it's going to get stuck forever. Now, there are multiple ways we could handle this. One way would be with like a dead letter queue, which we're not going to get into, but it kind of shows you that we kind of glossed over the complexity of PubSub. There's a lot more to learn when it comes to this message queue component. And an alternative, and maybe this is probably a better design decision, would be to poll. That means our Cloud Run service would be the one that when this guy has capacity, it would pull a message from PubSub, say, okay, there's a new video to process. Let's start processing the video. And assuming our site has a decent amount of traffic, there's always going to be some videos available to process. So that would be a good decision. And in that case, we don't even have to worry about making this a non-public service because there would not be any HTTP endpoints exposed at all. These would really be just workers. They would not be exposed. It would not even be a service. It's just a bunch of workers that are continuously processing videos. And there's a few more details about this setup that I'll probably add in the article below. But we would still sort of run into the 600-second retry, like PubSub would basically re-add the message after we pull it out of the queue if we're still processing it after 600 seconds. And honestly, there are other ways we could have fixed this as well. Like maybe if we see that a video is already processed, we could immediately send an acknowledgement. I just wanted to kind of cover the poll architecture as well. Now, is that enough? Like, is that going to eliminate the problem of having a message stuck in PubSub forever? Not quite, because what happens in our original code, if you go look at it carefully, what happens if a video fails processing? Well, we update the status of a video to processing while it is processing, but what if the processing fails? We never reset the status. We should probably set it back to undefined or whatever value we originally had it to, so that next time we get a message from PubSub that we don't just ignore it, we actually start processing it. So that's like one of the biggest issues we had. This is probably where a lot of the complexity in this architecture comes from. And there are other things like we just didn't, decide to clean up the raw videos in the cloud storage bucket. Those are kind of minor things that you could probably fix pretty easily. And what about the file upload limit? Remember when we generated a signed URL that's only valid for 15 minutes? Does that mean if we try to upload a video and we have a slow internet connection and it takes longer than 15 minutes, does that mean the upload is going to fail? Well, actually, that's not an issue in this case because the validation only runs when we start uploading the video. If it takes longer than 15 minutes, as long as we started before that 15-minute expiration, it will still work. So that's not an issue. But one limitation is when it comes to video streaming. Sites like YouTube and Netflix have complex streaming setups where they have something called adaptive streaming, where not only are they serving videos in 360p, but they're serving it based on the internet connection of the user. That would mean we convert the video into multiple resolutions, probably in a somewhat intelligent way. Like if a user uploads a 360p video, we probably can't upscale it to 1080p. That wouldn't really make any sense. YouTube definitely doesn't do anything like that. So we'd need some kind of logic running. We only scratch the surface when it comes to FFmpeg, to be honest. And there are libraries to add adaptive streaming. I'll link those below. But again, it's not going to be something that's trivial. And to be honest, cloud storage actually does provide some amount of streaming. We don't have to download the entire video in the browser before we can watch it. If you open up your network tab and you watch one of the videos using the app that we built, you'll see that there are small chunks being sent continuously by cloud storage as we watch the video. Like it'll send like maybe 10 megabytes, probably smaller than that, maybe 300 kilobytes, I think, or something like that. And it'll keep sending those small chunks as we watch that short 360p video. And another thing, we probably don't need to serve static content like videos over just a centralized store. Remember, our cloud storage is stored in US Central 1. What if we have users all around the world? Well, for that, we'd probably use a content delivery network to serve videos along with the streaming solution I talked about. If you want to learn more about content delivery networks, check out the system design course. Another big issue would be, what about illegal content? Like if we have public APIs where anybody can upload videos, then how do we deal with illegal content? We're going to get sued, and that's something you probably don't want to deal with. And for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily recommend deploying this publicly. In all likelihood, nobody's going to upload illegal videos if you just have a few users using the website. But in my case, I'm definitely not going to do it because with the audience I have, you never know if one crazy person is going to do something. That's not to say my audience is, bad or anything. It's just the scale of my audience. That's what I meant, of course. But those are just some architectural improvements that we could make to this application. I'll also leave a list of tasks that we can do to make this more similar to YouTube. I'm sure you can just, browse on YouTube just to get some inspiration. We could add thumbnails. Of course, we could add titles and descriptions. We could tie videos to the uploader. A lot of UI work to be done. A lot of backend work to be done as well. There's probably even a decent share of bugs that we can fix, as well as adding a lot more error handling and possibly retry logic. Like if we fail to process a video, maybe we can retry that. But in conclusion, I wanted to thank you for making it this far. I'm sure you learned something new. I really hope you did. But I think the most important takeaway from this, if this was your first time building like a decently large scaled app like this with a lot of services talking to each other, I hope you kind of learned how to think about this, because that's what's important here. It's not about memorizing the exact architecture. It's about the thought process. How do we want our PubSub and Cloud Run to interact? How do we want to do it so that we never run into any issues, or at least minimizing the number of issues, and also doing it in a scalable way? What are the limitations? Remember, one limitation here for sure is that we can't process a video for more than 60 minutes, at least when we're doing it in the push way. Possibly we can improve this, and maybe by running some type of batch process, we can actually process videos for much longer. It's all about the thought process. It's all about the trade-offs. That's what's important here. I tried to take trade-offs that would make this decently scalable, but also expose you to some of the complexity that can be involved. I didn't have to add a message queue, to be honest, but I wanted to expose you to this type of component because it's always used in large-scale systems. And again, thanks for making it this far, and definitely let me know if you have any feedback.